Today we're going to be making some beef bone broth. I want to do a little video on it and just show you how I did it. In our farm store, we sell beef stock bones. They're in bags of 5-pound bags, and the cost is $2 a pound, so it's a relatively inexpensive way to make beef bone broth. And one of the key things to remember is when you're making bone broth is the quality of the bones that you're using. If you're using bones that are of questionable quality, you don't know where they came from, how the animals were raised, it's really probably not very beneficial to be making bone broth from those bones, because the goal of bone broth is to get the nutrients cooked out of the bones. The marrow is what makes up the bone, makes it a living organism, and if those bones are coming from sick, weak, poorly fed animals, they're not going to be very healthy for you to be making bone broth of them, because the marrow is what's the life of the bone. So if you're using a sick bone, you're going to have sick bone broth. So just make sure you get good quality organic or grass-fed bones when you're making bone broth. I put the bones all on baking pans here. I took them out of the bag and put them on baking pans, and then made sure they were rimmed, because you may have some juice that will run off and you don't want it to run into your oven. So I'm going to be baking these bones at 400 degrees 30 minutes, and then I'm going to flip the bones over and I'm going to bake them for 30 more. The reasoning behind that is, for some reason, just roasting the bones first tends to make a more flavorful bone broth. And these are actually pretty large bones. Sometimes you'll have like bones that are a bit thinner, like this bone. Not exactly sure what part of the cow that was, but the bones will be thinner and smaller. These bones, you can tend to cook the marrow out a lot quicker because they're thinner. Now these bones are quite large and quite thick. So I'm anticipating having to cook these bones at least 48 hours, if not maybe even a little longer, to get as much of the marrow out as I can, the good stuff. So I'll be baking these, I'll be sliding these in the oven. Taking the bones out of the oven, they've been in at 400 degrees for an hour, 30 minutes on one side, flip them over to 30 minutes on the other side, and they actually smell really, really amazing. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use the tongs, and I'm gonna take these bones, oops, I had a little water in the bottom there, and put them in a kettle. Now, when you're making bone broth, you can use a kettle, you can use a crock pot, you can use an Instant Pot, but my preferred method is the stovetop in a kettle. Now, it really doesn't matter what your preferred method of cooking is. The main thing is long and slow, because you want the bones to break down, and you want to be able to get the nutrients out of the marrow that is in the bone. Now, in addition to the bones that I put here in the kettle, the roasted bones, I'm adding 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. This is an acid that helps break down the bones. And then in this little is a teaspoon of salt and a teaspoon of peppercorns. And I'm going to sprinkle that on over top. So you want to cover your bones with water, just so they're covered. And if you live in an area where your water is chemically treated in any way, you do not want to use it in bone broth, because you don't want to be cooking your bones for such an extended period of time in water that has chemicals in it. It's only going to magnify whatever the chemicals that are in your water. So I've covered the bones with water. Now I'm going to put these on the stovetop on low, and they're thick, heavy bones. So I'm going to come back in about 2 days. 48 hours is about, you can kind of play with this. This is an exact science. Can be anywhere from 24 to 48 hours, or however long you feel till the bones are starting to break down. At this point, some people add their vegetables, because vegetables are basically used to season and flavor your broth. And a lot of people use celery and carrots and onions. Some even use vegetable trimmings. I prefer to cook my broth, my bones, for the majority of their time without the vegetables in, because I think if you cook the vegetables too long in the water, if you're cooking them with the bones too long, they kind of get a little bit of a burnt or kind of off taste. So I prefer to cook my vegetables with my bones for maybe the last 6 to 12 hours. Again, it's not an exact science, but I just want to let you know, you can put your vegetables in now, or you can wait and put them in later. Now I've got it on the stove here, and I'm going to turn it on to a low setting, and I'll kind of adjust the temperature to keep it at a very, very minimal boil. And the temperature's set, and I'm gonna put it on the burner, and I will cover it and let it cook for, just kind of check it periodically, but I really don't worry about it. I just kind of let it sit there and do its thing for the next day or two, and we'll be back to see how it turns out. The bone broth has been cooking for about 30 hours now, and I'm gonna take this carrot and I'm just gonna roughly chop it. I don't peel it or anything like that, and I'm gonna roughly chop an onion, because you're not gonna, this is just for flavoring. It is not something that you need to worry about how it's chopped up. So I've got it all chopped up now, and I'm gonna go put it in for the last few hours of cooking. You can see here I put some chicken feet in. I did that after I showed you yesterday what I was doing. I put the chicken feet in to help get more collagen in the broth, or make it a little more gelatinous. So now I'm going to put the carrots and onions in and let it cook overnight. These beef bones have been cooking for about 40 hours now, and they've just been on my back burner. But right now we're going to take this, and it's been cooking for, like I said, 40 hours. And I'm going to show you how to strain it. This is what it looks like after cooking it for 40 hours. I'm going to take a colander. It's got large holes. This is just for my first straining that I'm going to do that, and I'm going to fit it inside this kettle here. And then I'm going to take this cup, and I'm going to dip the juices out of here and strain everything through. Kind of turn my kettles here so they're closer so I don't drip everywhere. It smells amazing. Slowly pouring the juices off. You can see the remaining bones in there. Not sure my colander will hold all these bones to let them fully drain. We'll see if we can get them all in here. Oh, without making a big mess. Yeah, got them in there. Now I'm gonna go rinse this kettle out and then do my second straining. Strainer here, and this I use to strain out do my second straining. You can see that the larger strainer left, there's peppercorns and kind of tissuey pieces in there that were left from the first straining, but it just gets rid of the bones in the larger pieces. Now I'm going to take it and I'm going to strain it through there. Some people do a further straining through a cloth. I don't feel like I need to do that, but that's personal preference. So now I've got my broth strained twice, and I'm going to take it and I'm going to put it into this jar for use. I will use this in gravies and soups, and I like it as a base for Italian beef. And you'll see here I put it in this glass jar. This is just for use in the refrigerator. If I'm going to freeze it, I usually put it in plastic storage containers. I know some people freeze in glass, but I've had mixed success with freezing in liquids in glass. Sometimes the glass breaks. Still trying to work on that science, but I do know that it freezes well in plastic storage containers. So that's something that you can work on a little bit, but I'll just put my broth in here, and this will be for my use over the next while, and then I'll put some in the freezer.